Today on the Transplant Helper, I want to pause and ask you several questions you can answer for yourself individually that will help us all to gauge better your transplant experience. Go ahead and stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome to the Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Merle, and today I wanted to pause for just a moment and beg and plead with you, if you would, to please be prepared right out of the gate to go ahead and give me some feedback. I need today you to start getting ready to comment below this video and to tell me something about your transplant experience. Now, I know as well as anybody that each and every one of us are individuals, therefore, we all have various and different experiences when it comes to transplant. And that's why I think we live such great lives, because we are willing at times to share those experiences with one another, to kind of come together in a camaraderie that really helps one another. So if you can be a part of that today, that would be absolutely awesome. But the way we're going to format this is I'm going to ask you in just a moment, starting off, I'm going to ask you 6 basic questions you can answer for yourself. And by you sharing those answers, or at least thinking about those answers, you can better understand what your experience has been and maybe be prepared to share that at some point with someone in order to help them out. If nothing else, you'll be helping yourself out by thinking these things through. So with that said, here we go. Question number 1, very simply, what is the most rewarding part of transplant in the way that you see it? What is the most rewarding part of transplant in the way that you see it? Well, for me personally, I'm going to answer that for you. The most rewarding part I found of transplant yet has to be the time that I've been offered. You know, every single moment, every single day, every single flip of the calendar, I just get excited because transplant for me has certainly been an opportunity to enjoy life, and particularly to be able to spend more time with my family, with my friends, with those that are precious, those that are close to me, those that I love. That's what transplant has really been. And by far and away, the most rewarding part of transplant has to be the time frame that we get. Now, whether we live after transplant a matter of a few weeks, a few days, a few months, a few years, or a few decades, it doesn't matter. Those can still be considered as precious moments in time that we have been able to experience as a result and as a reward of transplant. So question number 1, what is the most rewarding part of transplant for you? Only you can answer that. Go ahead and comment below with that answer. Question number 2, what is the most trying part of transplant for you? By trying, I mean, what is the part of transplant that was so hard, that was very difficult to get through, therefore it tried or tested you as you went through it? Well, for me, I'll give this answer. For me, the most trying part of transplant was probably the pain, the physical pain I felt after transplant. Now, not everybody experiences physical pain in the same way. As a matter of fact, I've seen several different people pop up in Facebook groups and such when the pain aspects have come up, and they've said, oh, I had no pain. I didn't experience any pain. No big deal for me. And maybe that's the case. All of our pain tolerances are different. Maybe it's the case, though, that you were on a pretty good bit of pain medicine, especially right out of surgery. And maybe that's where that buffer came in. And I've got a whole video just the other day that I published all about pain medications and transplant. You ought to check that out. But anyway, for me, I'll tell you the truth. When I first came out of transplant, maybe for that first day and that second day, I experienced very little pain. But by the 3rd and 4th day, something went wrong, something changed, and I was in excruciating pain. Now, as it turns out, one of my drain tubes that was coming out of my chest, I think I had 3, one of them had gotten out of place and got off on a lung and was actually physically rubbing the wall of my lung, causing terrible, terrible, excruciating pain. I didn't know what it was, and they were having to give me pain medicine very, very often. Even things like fentanyl. I was taking in my neck through my central line, whatever it was. They were injecting that in my neck just to try to make it tolerable so I could even bear the pain. And I can remember shaking, almost convulsing. The pain was so bad. So for me, the most trying part of transplant had to be the pain. I hope and pray you never have experienced that or never will, but that was my experience anyway, so that's the answer to my question. Now, here we go. Question number 3, what was the most surprising part of transplant? What about the whole transplant process really kind of surprised you? Well, my answer to that question is pretty simple as well. I was probably most surprised with number one, how difficult it is to get on the list, and number two, how difficult it is to stay on the list as you're waiting on transplant. Now, the wait is difficult, no doubt. And once you're on that list, you're on the list to an extent, but it's such a journey. I didn't really comprehend. I think back years and years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when the words transplant first came up with my name in the same sentence. I was in a panic. I know I was scared, but I can remember thinking then, well, you know what? If it comes to that, if they have to list me for transplant, I'll be listed. I'll wait a few weeks, months, whatever. I'll get a transplant and that'll be it. No, that wasn't it. The listing process within itself was surprisingly difficult. As a matter of fact, I've had a whole series of videos I'll link up here in the corners concerning the transplant evaluation process. I think I broke it down into 5 different videos maybe. Anyway, they'll be linked here. But one of the first videos I did right out of that was how long and drawn out and even grueling the transplant process was. And that was a surprise to me. It was a surprise to me to learn later that even though I was finally listed for transplant, eventually got to a status 1A, that it was not just a done deal to be a status 1A. Every single week, you may not realize this, every single week your transplant center has to reevaluate in a way and resubmit your application to remain whatever status you are. And if they're not doing a good job of that, you could very easily be dropped in status or taken off the list altogether. But they have to make the case, okay? And I didn't realize that. So that was surprising to me. So that's your question. What is the most surprising part of transplant to you? Comment below. Let me know about that. In the fourth place, in the next question, what was the most disturbing part of transplant for you? What was it about the transplant journey that just kind of got you off kilter, disturbed your mind to even consider? Well, for me, and this is morbid to say, but for me, it had to be watching people die, okay? I had known for a long time that there were thousands and thousands of people all listed across the United States every single day for some type of transplant, whether it's heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas, whatever it was. There were thousands of people listed. I'd also known the statistic that went along with that, which back then, 2013-ish, maybe it's about the same today, that about 23 people died every single day waiting for transplant. I knew that. But you see, that hadn't become a reality yet. Yeah, I understood the possibility. Yes, I understood the risk. Yes, I understood the possibility, whatever. But it wasn't until I was actually in the middle of that transplant process that I really started to be disturbed by that. Such as when I was awaiting transplant for that last month or so, and I was in the hospital, condemned to the hospital, I had friends of mine who died. People who I had walked with in the hallway, people who I'd stood in their room or sat in their room and visited with them just a few days before, who were dying. They were waiting for transplant, and they weren't being blessed with that transplant gift, and they died. That was disturbing. I can still remember vividly my first night in CICU, critical care, cardiac intensive care, whatever that is. In CICU, my first night after my transplant, how the man right on the other side of the curtain literally died that night. And he had had a transplant too. Things just didn't go well. He crashed. He crashed 4 different times that night. They had to revive him. Finally, they called the time of death. That was so disturbing. And I have to say, there were nights and nights on end after that when I would wake up just in cold sweats, just, nightmare type things, all thinking about that man's situation or others around me. How disturbing that was. Thankful that I made it. Thankful that you made it. But that was the most disturbing thing. So that was question number 4. What was the most disturbing part of transplant for you? Question number 5. What was the most disappointing part of transplant for you? What was the most disappointing part of transplant for you? Well, I have to say, there were some disappointments out there. How long we had to wait was disappointing. Missing getting a call and it not being mine, very disappointing. But that probably wasn't it. Probably my most disappointing moments in transplant or in the process of transplant really came after transplant. I've gone through all of this. I've had friends, I've had family members, I've had coworkers, just everybody rallying around me. They were there for me. What can I do? How can I help? Doing this and that, financially, emotionally, physically, giving assistance to me, to my family. Overwhelming. I cannot thank everyone enough who was involved in my transplant and how much easier my life was because of them. But what's disappointing about that, and maybe you've experienced this, maybe not, I hope you haven't. The most disappointing part of that, though, Was it at some point? Maybe for me, it was about 2-3 weeks after transplant. Most of those people disappeared. A lot of that care, a lot of that concern, a lot of that assistance started disappearing. I started feeling like I was more alone. I started feeling like everything was back on me and back on my family, my wife particularly, my parents who were helping at that point, that it was back on us to do. And that's disappointing. So I just want to say to you that don't be surprised if after transplant, some people start to turn their backs on you. Maybe you wear out your welcome. That's the way we say it in the South. Maybe you tire them, or they get bored with the situation. Maybe they just don't understand, and this is what you need to do. Help them understand that your healing process is going to be a long one, and your recovery process is going to be a long one, and that your life is going to be forever changed by this. And you may still need their help. So most disturbing part, or disappointing part, I should say, of that had to be the lack of assistance that I felt like I received in the weeks after transplant. So let's just hope that doesn't go the same for you. But I'm being honest. You answer that beneath the video in however you wish. Okay. And then here we go. Number 6, the last question here. Please answer this one. What was the most fulfilling part of transplant? What made transplant for you worth it? Well, I would have to say this is a close kin to the very first one, the rewarding, and that is the time. But really what the most fulfilling part of transplant has been for me is the opportunity to help others. I don't know what you feel like, but for me personally, I feel a tremendous sense of just wanting to give back, just wanting to reach out, just wanting to make someone else's life better. And I'm thankful to get to do that through this video series. So I just hope you'll answer these questions. What was the most rewarding, the most trying, the most surprising, the most disturbing, the most disappointing, and the most fulfilling part of transplant for you? How has life changed for you as a transplant patient? That'll be what your experience is about. That'll be what I would love for you to share. And that will be what we need to understand so we can help the next person. I appreciate you joining me today on this video. If you would, please give me a big thumbs up on this video. Consider subscribing to the channel while you're here already. I hope to continue to provide content like this for you on a regular basis. But thank you so much today for helping and for joining with me. Until next time, stay stronger, friends.